Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed. It's time to update our 1440p monitor recommendations for the early parts of 2024. Last update was back in October of last year, and since then, plenty of stuff has been happening. Even more OLED options, a few new interesting lower cost products, and of course, general pricing adjustments across the board. As with our previous best of videos, we tend to talk about and recommend monitors we've personally tested and know to be good, or monitors that are very similar to products we have tested. It's always worth going back and checking out the dedicated monitor reviews we produce for more in-depth thoughts on each product, but just so you know, these recommendations are not sponsored in any way by any company. They're based on our testing and reviews. Any pricing that we talk about was correct at the time of filming, but of course, you should check in your region, given the focus here is on monitors in USD. We have links in the description below to check current pricing if you happen to see this video weeks or months after it went live. In previous 1440p recommendation videos, there was a clear split between lower cost bang for buck SDR monitors in the mid and lower parts of the market and higher cost HDR products for premium buyers. In 2024, that's no longer the case thanks to the introduction of new entry-level 1440p LCDs with mini LED backlights and true HDR functionality, bringing sought-after HDR experiences to buyers with less than $300 US to spend. With this shift taking place and HDR being introduced at lower price points, it makes it much more difficult to recommend some of the products that used to dominate these videos. If you're after a cheap 1440p display, why wouldn't you get the product with real HDR over the product with fake HDR? So with that in mind, it's clear what the best 1440p 144Hz-ish monitor's choice is, and what you should get if you're after a budget 1440p monitor. It's the AOC Q27G3XMN. Yeah, it's a shocker of a name. It's hard to remember, but it offers a 27-inch 1440p VA LCD at 180Hz with a 336-zone full-array local dimming backlight, providing true, though entry-level, HDR hardware capabilities. And you'll get all of that for around $280 US, which is an astonishingly low price point. There's huge benefits to this hardware configuration for HDR gaming. This AOC monitor is able to deliver much tighter dimming relative to most other LCDs at this price, a better contrast ratio in real-world content, richer blacks and shadows, and a high peak brightness that exceeds 1000 nits. And this is complemented by a 1440p panel at 180Hz, which is still really quite decent for today's games, and is another example of how HDR doesn't need a 4K resolution to be good. Of course, we're not seeing a flagship high-end experience from 336 zones. There can be issues with blooming and so on, but it absolutely destroys the LCD competition at a similar price. Most other low-cost HDR monitors I've tested have had heaps of issues like shockingly bad firmware that doesn't allow you to easily switch between the SDR and HDR modes, or busted calibration that makes the monitor near unusable. None of these things are an issue on the AOC model, although there can be minor issues with scan lines and backlight zone flicker. Motion performance is pretty acceptable too from a VA LCD, delivering the best tuning I've seen from a non-Samsung implementation. Dark level smearing isn't fully eliminated but not too problematic, and response time speed ends up similar to some other budget IPS LCDs. It's not a fast monitor by any stretch, but it does a good enough job that it's not a deal breaker for those that want an affordable true HDR monitor. The main issue with the Q27G3XMN usually comes down to availability. This monitor can be hard to find, and I'm sure now that it's appeared in this recommendation video, it could be even harder. In the US, it's usually available from time to time, but good luck getting one in Australia without importing it, which makes no sense. This is a great product. It should be available everywhere. Get on it, AOC. At just $280, I would recommend the Q27G3XMN to most gaming monitor buyers after something priced below $300 US. I would also recommend it to people after a budget 1440p display in general. I'd recommend it to people wanting a budget HDR display in general. There's really a lot of categories that this monitor satisfies, which is why I give it a strong recommendation. While I would generally recommend the AOC Q27G3XMN to most gamers after a bang for buck 1440p gaming monitor, there are some circumstances where a display without true HDR functionality may be more appealing. So I'll cover some options here for those that don't especially care about HDR. What are the reasons to avoid the AOC option? Well, the Q27G3XMN doesn't have the best response time performance and can produce dark smearing in some situations, which isn't ideal for multiplayer gamers. Typically speaking, it's less common to play a multiplayer game with HDR enabled. HDR itself, with its dark shadows and high peak brightness, can make some games more difficult to play as enemies are harder to spot, in which case HDR becomes a bit irrelevant in your buying decision. That type of gamer might want to preference a great SDR monitor with fast response times. You might also want to avoid some of the minor annoyances with the AOC option, such as faint scan lines, some backlight zone related flickering concerns, and weak viewing angles. Or you simply might be looking to save a few dollars where possible, as a lot of budget 1440p monitors now sit at or below $250 US. The two products catching my eye at the moment are the LG 27GL850 and the MSI G274QPF-QD, both priced around $250, offering 27-inch 1440p IPS LCD panels. The 27GL850 at 144Hz and the MSI model at 170Hz. It depends on your preferences as to which of these is the better choice. The LG 27GL850 is slightly faster and a bit better tuned than the MSI, offering around a 20% performance advantage over the AOC Q27G3XMN with little to no dark smearing. The G274QPF-QD is more like 15% faster, again with no visible dark smearing, also providing a better contrast ratio and wider color gamut compared to the LG. Being IPS LCD monitors, they have excellent viewing angles and no scanline concerns, plus they are both a little cheaper than the AOC. Of course, the big downside here is neither the LG or MSI options offer true HDR hardware capabilities, despite what some of the marketing materials say. Opting for these over the AOC model means kissing good quality HDR goodbye. They're also just not amazing value at the moment, as I think HDR is definitely worth the $30 premium AOC are asking for. But like I said, there are some reasons why these products might make sense, and so long as you're not spending any more than about $250 on this type of monitor, I think it's a somewhat reasonable decision. If you're after a premium 1440p monitor with a high refresh rate, I think it's hard to go past one of the latest 360Hz QD-OLED offerings. Not only do these monitors offer elite motion clarity thanks to the combination of a high refresh rate and fast response times, but they're also just generally excellent displays for a variety of gaming needs, including HDR gaming. So far, I've tested two 27-inch 1440p 360Hz QD-OLED gaming monitors, the MSI MPG271QRX and the Dell Alienware AW2725DF. Both of these monitors are remarkably similar in their overall performance, so depending on pricing and availability in your region, I'm recommending both of them. Being an OLED monitor, we get all the usual benefits of OLED, including elite response times and per pixel control. These are super fast monitors, they have excellent zero-level blacks, per pixel local dimming allows HDR content to look fantastic, and brightness is very good, reaching around 1000 nits peak. Both the MSI and Dell variants offer excellent calibration, great color quality, and 3-year burn-in warranties. The reason why I'm recommending a 360Hz QD-OLED in particular is the higher refresh rate of 360Hz compared to 240Hz for last year's WOLED alternatives, and that does lead to better motion clarity, similar to that of a 500Hz LCD. This leads to the ultimate experience for competitive gamers that want speed but don't want to sacrifice adaptive sync viewing angles or resolution. And on top of that, it ends up being a highly versatile display because of its strong HDR capabilities, ideal for single-player gamers as well. So no matter the type of gaming you want to do, these 360Hz QD-OLEDs offer an excellent experience. The other main advantages to going QD-OLED are its superior brightness in its HDR mode, better subpixel structure that leads to clearer text, and its glossy screen coating. The coating is a personal preference thing though. Glossy can look better in darker usage environments, but the panel structure of QD-OLED reflects a lot of ambient light in brighter environments, which puts it at a disadvantage compared to matte WOLED screens. When it comes to choosing between the MSI and Dell variants, the main differences are as follows. The MSI model gets slightly brighter, has proper HDMI 2.1 and packs a USB-C input with power delivery and a KVM switch. The Dell model is better calibrated, has a nicer design in my opinion, and nails HDR-SDR switching. The vast majority of performance characteristics are identical or near identical between the two, as they both use the same QD-OLED panel, so it's a toss-up in most situations. What I would do is get whichever of the two is cheaper in your region. In the United States, that will typically be the MSI variant, which has an $800 MSRP, compared to $900 for the Alienware. Outside the US, the Alienware model is typically cheaper and will be the better buy. Also worth considering are older 27-inch 1440p 240Hz W OLED monitors, which aren't quite as good as the latest 360Hz QD OLEDs, but are often quite a bit cheaper. The standout option here is usually the AOC Agon Pro AG276QZD, which throughout most of this year has been priced at or below $700 US. It performs pretty well and of course offers the benefits of OLED, so it's worth checking out if you can't quite justify spending $800 or $900 US and don't need the 360Hz refresh rate. And lastly, while 360Hz QD OLED is an excellent choice for high-performance competitive gaming, the absolute best of the best motion clarity is still only achievable with an LCD that features backlight strobing. The Asus ROG Swift PG27AQN is difficult to recommend for regular buyers due to its high price tag and lack of HDR functionality, but it does have excellent ULMB2 backlight strobing that, as you can see from this UFO test result, outstrips 360Hz QD OLED in motion. If you specifically need the best clarity and are willing to sacrifice other functionality, it's worth a look, and these days at $750 it's not quite as pricey as it once was. If you want a 1440p 240Hz monitor but don't want to spend big money to grab a premium OLED offering, there's good news. Standard 1440p 240Hz LCD monitors are cheaper than ever. These days, you don't need to spend any more than $400 US to grab 1440p 240Hz, which will deliver you great motion clarity and lots of future-proofing for multiplayer gaming. However, in this sort of category, we are yet to see great budget-friendly 1440p 240Hz HDR-capable monitors, so opting for a high-refresh LCD will mean sacrificing HDR relative to what we saw in lower refresh categories with the HDR-capable AOC Q27G3XMN. The two options I'd be considering right now in this class are the MSI G274QPX and the LG 27GR83Q. I've seen both of these monitors on sale for $350 or less, although typically the MSI model is cheaper, usually sitting at $350 exactly, whereas the LG model jumps between $500 and $350 on what seems like a monthly basis. It's just not worth it at $500, but $350 is a great deal. With these two options currently available, it's difficult to recommend any 1440p 240Hz monitor above $400. I've tested quite a few of them and they just don't offer enough additional performance to justify the higher price unless you go with an OLED. Of the two models I mentioned, the LG 27GR83Q is the superior choice, so if you see both at the same price, the LG model is the way to go. Like the MSI variant, it's a 27-inch 1440p 240Hz IPS LCD, but LG are offering somewhat better performance and a richer feature set. Motion performance is better tuned on the 27GR83Q, so while both deliver decent speed and a low latency 240Hz experience, the LG model is slightly better in that department. It also has somewhat better color accuracy and a wider range of calibration options, so typically it's easier to get the LG variant into a nice and accurate state, while also being slightly better from the factory. HDMI 2.1 strengthens the 27GR83Q's feature set as well. To me, the 27GR83Q does enough to justify around a 10 to 15% price premium over the MSI G274QPX, so that's the benchmark I'd set for a decision when looking at local pricing in your region. With that said, the G274QPX does get pretty close. It's still a great monitor in my opinion, and areas like motion performance and color accuracy from the factory are only minor downgrades that could be hard to spot. When not factoring in sale prices, the G274QPX can be significantly cheaper, so an MSRP versus MSRP battle has the MSI variant well ahead in the bang for buck stakes. Either way you go though, you will be getting a very good 1440p high refresh rate monitor with plenty of speed for all types of gaming. In previous months I've recommended the Gigabyte M27QX, and that can be found for around $400 US. This is another monitor that's worth considering as it's pretty similar to the MSI G274QPX. In my review of the MSI model, I had both variants trading blows. The Gigabyte a little better tuned for motion, the MSI with a wider color gamut and higher contrast ratio. Right now, the Gigabyte model is 15% more expensive in the US, which isn't outrageous, but I'd have the MSI model as the better value choice. The only other thing I'll say at the moment is that the budget 1440p high refresh rate category is being squeezed at both ends. Without true HDR in these products, a lot of gamers might be better off sacrificing the higher refresh rate to get a 180Hz AOC Q27G3XMN, which also happens to be cheaper at $280. And going the other way, 240Hz OLEDs are getting cheaper and cheaper with some models, again from AOC, dropping to as little as $650 US. Now that is still a significant price premium over the $350 to $400 LCDs I've just been discussing, but they are much better and prices have been dropping consistently over the space of just a year. Back at the start of 2023, you were looking at $1,000 for that sort of hardware. Now it's just $650, so who knows where it will be in just a few years from now. It's worth knowing all of that when buying into this category, especially if you are planning to keep your monitor for upwards of 5 years. If you're after a 1440p HDR gaming monitor and you've skipped to this part of the video to find my recommendations, I've actually already covered my picks for HDR in this guide, so there's nothing further to add really. If you're after a budget 1440p HDR gaming monitor, I would strongly recommend the AOC Q27G3XMN, a 27-inch 1440p VA LCD with a 336 zone mini LED backlight. It retails for just $280 US and offers outstanding value along with true HDR capabilities at prices we haven't seen before. If you're after a premium 1440p HDR monitor, my picks in the high refresh rate section make the most sense. 360Hz QD OLEDs are currently the best, so I'd be looking at the MSI MPG271QRX and the Dell Alienware AW2725DF. Also worth considering are slightly cheaper 240Hz WOLED offerings like the AOC Agon Pro AG276QZD. Between these OLEDs and the cheap VA LCD of the Q27G3XMN, I think this covers what most people will be looking for, and for more information on those products, rewind this video or look at the individual reviews right here on Monitors Unboxed. And that does it for today's monitor recommendation video. Lots and lots of options to choose from, covering most of the 1440p categories I hope you are considering at the moment. If you do want to learn more about the monitors we've talked about today, we do have dedicated reviews for most of them that will go into the specifics around performance and features, which are well worth watching. I also have breakdowns of other monitor types on the channel, as well as a general buying guide for gaming monitors as a whole, if you're interested. So yeah, plenty of stuff right here on Monitors Unboxed. If you want to support Monitors Unboxed and the work that we do here, the best way to do that is head to our Patreon and Floatplane accounts. Links to those are in the description below. It takes a lot of work to make these sorts of comparison videos because it's not just making this specific video, we also have gone and tested all the products that we've talked about in this video, and that takes a ton of time and effort. And even some of the monitors that we've talked about, we have had to purchase ourselves. So supporting us directly through Patreon or Floatplane is a great way to fund the monitor testing on this channel. And you get some cool benefits in return, like our Discord community, which is a great place to chat about monitors. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.